welcome to the bread kitchen. Whenever it gets round to Lent, my thoughts turn to hot crust buns, and you really can't beat homemade hot crust buns. So to make my hot crust buns, I've got 450 grams of strong bread flour, 250 grams of lukewarm milk, but you could use water if you prefer, a beaten egg, 50 grams of sugar and 50 grams of butter at room temperature cut into little pieces. Now I need some dried fruit, and I'm using 30 grams of sultanas and 75 grams of raisins, but you could use any combination of these that you like, or even add in just dried mixed fruit. I've got a teaspoon of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of dried yeast, and for spices I've got a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and 3 pinches each of ground ginger and ground cloves. I'll start by adding the yeast in the milk, stirring it well, and then leaving it for 10 minutes for the yeast to start growing. Put the flour in a bowl together with the salt. Then sieve in the spices and mix well. Now add in the butter, and just as if you were making scones, rub the butter into the flour. When all the butter's rubbed in and you've got this lovely light mixture, add in the sugar and mix that in. Then add in the yeast milk mixture and the beaten egg, and mix to a smooth dough. And what you'll end up with is a smooth but very sticky dough. Now scrape the dough out onto a lightly floured surface, then knead the dough for a couple of minutes. Now when you get a sticky dough like this, it's very elastic. The temptation is always to add more and more flour to try and get rid of the stickiness. But regular viewers of the bread kitchen will know I have a preferred way for getting rid of stickiness out of doughs. I use a traditional French baker's technique, which is to pick up the dough, slap it down, fold it over, take a quarter turn, slap it down, fold it over, and I'm going to do this now for about 10 minutes, and it'll get rid of a lot of this stickiness from the dough. So after 10 minutes of slap and roll, I've got a dough which is still a little bit tacky. It's not as sticky as it was, and it's not sticking to my hands much either. Now I'm just going to spread the dough out, sprinkle on all the dried fruit, fold it in. This is where a scraper comes in very handy. Then knead the dough to incorporate the dried fruit. Don't worry if they start to fall out, because you can always roll the dough around to pick them up like a hoover. Once you've got the fruit distributed fairly evenly throughout the dough, form the dough into a ball, pop it into a lightly greased bowl, cover and leave in a warm place to allow the dough to about double in size. Well, you can see that my dough's risen very well, so I'll just turn it out onto this lightly floured surface. Knock the dough back to get any air out. Just bring the dough together, stretching and pulling up the sides and rotating, so we're forming it into a nice ball again. Then we'll pop it back in the greased bowl, recover, and let it rest for about 30 to 45 minutes, or until the dough's almost doubled in size again. My dough's risen again, so I'll just turn it out and knock it back. And then I'll cut the dough into 12 approximately equal pieces. So there we are, 12 roughly equal pieces of dough. Now I'll just put these to one side. Now for each piece of dough, press it out slightly and then fold the edge into the middle and rotate. So you're kind of pulling up the edges and pushing them down into the middle to make yourself a nice ball. Turn it over, then cup your hand and rub it in a circular motion so you're getting a nice ball of dough. There we go, that's lovely. Then pop it on a lightly greased baking tray and carry on with the rest. So there's my 12 rolls. I've put them reasonably close together because I want them to puff up and touch just slightly. Now I'll pop them in my trusty plastic bag and leave them for about half an hour to prove. Now the crosses on hot cross buns are made out of flour and water. So I've got 75 grams of plain flour and I'm going to add 4 tablespoons or a quarter of a cup of water and mix these together. What I'm trying to make here is a pretty sloppy dough. It's not quite there. I'll just add a touch more water and mix that in. Now the dough needs to be wet enough that you can pipe it, because we're going to pipe the crosses on. I think I can probably get away with that. Now once the buns have risen, you can pipe on a cross. Now you might find it helpful if you cut the dough with a pair of scissors. I can now bake these at 180 fan oven, 200 normal oven for 12 to 15 minutes. Now while the buns are baking, make a glaze by mixing together 2 tablespoons of milk with 2 tablespoons of sugar. You might need to pop it in the microwave or heat it up a bit to get all the sugar to dissolve. And there are my lovely hot cross buns. Now while they're still hot, I'll brush them with the milk and sugar glaze. Now I'll just leave these to sit for about 10 minutes before I take them off the tray. Once they've cooled a little, you can slide these soft and sticky buns onto a wire rack to cool. These buns are spicy, soft and sticky. To serve, I like to cut them in half, put some spread on each side and just scoff them like this. Some people like to toast them. I like mine super soft. Absolutely gorgeous. The problem I find with supermarket hot cross buns is there's just too much spice in them. But these are lovely and soft and squidgy and delicately spiced. I hope you enjoy making your hot cross buns, and do join me next time in the bread kitchen.